Hiya, friends. Okay, so I'm going to read a story. And it's a story that I wrote over the summer. Some of you may know what it is, but it is called The Porcelain Doll. Many stories begin with once upon a time. This one is no different. Once upon a time, there was a porcelain doll who was alive, just like any other girl. Her china skin was as pale as milk and as smooth as satin. She was so dainty that you'd think a gust of wind would knock her over and she would break into 1,000 pieces. The pretty dresses she wore matched that of her delicate nature. Her shiny brown hair fell down to her waist when it was out of a bun, which it rarely was. She would walk aimlessly around her elaborate mansion, miss her parents had left for her. Her heart was lonely and loveless. With no one in the world, money could do nothing for her. She didn't have anyone to share it with. She would rarely go out. She hated the feeling of sunlight on her skin. She also feared the world. She thought it was dangerous and hateful. She longed for love more than anything. She grew weary waiting and looking out the window for love to come. She played melancholy piano and sang from her lonely heart. She hadn't heard a knock on her door in many years, but that day, she did. She approached the door cautiously and stood on her tiptoes and looked out the peephole. All that could be seen was the back of a man. She opened it slowly, and there stood a tall stranger dressed in a dark suit and a tall hat. Her first thought was of Abraham Lincoln, but she quickly realized that idea was stupid. He had a dark beard and warm brown eyes that seemed to be looking directly into her soul. There was something about him that felt off. Perhaps it was the fact that he was gorgeous. Yes, she stuttered. I have come to live in this charming little town, and I heard there was this little porcelain doll living in this huge house all by herself. I had to see if it was true. He smiled and his eyes twinkled. She was breathless. He walked through the large doorway into the house. The grandfather clock rang and echoed through the halls. What a wonderful home you have. But it feels so lonely. He turned to her and asked, You aren't lonely, are you? With a look of curiosity on his perfectly sculpted face. How would you like it if I came to visit you tomorrow? We can have tea and chat. She nodded, her eyes as wide as a doe's. Very well, then. I'll see you then, my doll. He turned on his heel and went out the door, but not before turning back and winking at her. She closed the door and fell to her knees. Her heart beat faster than it ever had. She quickly crawled to the window and peeked out. He was on the path, staring into space with a happy expression. He saw her pale face looking through the window, blushed, and rushed to his car, waiting at the edge of the pebble path. He couldn't have been there for over 10 minutes, but she could have listened to him forever. She danced about the great hall with happiness brimming in her heart. So the next day he arrived at the same time, and she excitedly let him in. They drank Earl Grey, and they ate strawberry cakes that she had made. He pulled out a small cream-colored box with a pink satin bow. She looked curiously at the box. She hadn't received a present in years. This is a gift. I saw it and I thought of you, he said, giving her the small box. She looked up and nodded, and he nodded. She pulled the bow and opened the box. It was a glass dove that fit in the palm of her tiny hand. It clinked in her china hands. She laughed in delight, and he smiled and sipped his tea. It reminded me of you, so pure and innocent and beautiful, he said. He always spoke very confidently. He was smart and cunning, always taking her breath away. After that day, he visited her every time on the same day. On the same time every day. She poured her heart out and would talk for hours about everything, including her family and their money. On the 8th day, he wasn't responding like he usually did. What's wrong? Is your tea cold? She asked worriedly. He said nothing and stood up. I can't hold it in anymore. I love you. He got down on his knee and popped out a ring. Will you marry me? He asked with a crooked smile. Yes. She couldn't stop jumping up and down. He took her into her arms and held her tight before she remembered. She ran upstairs to put on her mother's wedding dress. She had always hoped to wear it. This is it, she thought. She had been waiting to get married her whole life. They ran to the courthouse, wanting to get married as soon as they possibly could. They had a short ceremony, and before she knew it, they were married. As soon as the papers were signed, she screamed again. He hadn't spoken much, but he had that same crooked smile on his perfect face the whole time. They raced home, and he carried her through the door. He kicked open the door and closed it. She went in for a kiss. I'm so happy. But he didn't lean in. He looked at her coldly. You stupid girl, he said, almost smirking. She looked at him confused and hurt, but before she could speak, he turned away and he threw her. She shattered on the cold marble floor, cold as his eyes when he ran upstairs and shoved thousands of dollars into his bag from the safe behind the painting of her parents. He was down the stairs in a flash, swiftly, and he went out the door without even glancing at her. As he slammed the door, the old grandfather clock went off. A single tear fell down her broken face. The end.